Hello everybody, I'm Jack and I can tell you that my 1973 Pantera is now lime. Today we're going to talk about what it took to get it to this stage, whether I went too far with this colour, and there's some really bad news on the engine, parts of which you can see here on my bench. For those that are new to this series, last October I went to Oklahoma to buy the car, and 5 months later I had it back here in the UK. It was a part finished project, but it has turned out to be much more work than expected. As soon as it got here, I took the engine out. It had only been placed in the car for transport in any case, but disaster was narrowly avoided when the lift that I borrowed sprung a leak and the engine almost ended up falling on the car. Problems with a previous paint job meant that a repaint was inevitable. Though the car had sat unused, there was paint reaction in various areas that meant that redoing it was the only viable option. I sent it off to my friends at KC Auto Colours in Whitney. The guys got cracking, masking and sanding the body. Now when I went to see the Pantera, it had a rear wing, so the first job was to weld up the holes in the engine lid. The engine bay itself had been painted gloss like the bodywork, but that too had reacted, so it needed to be sanded right down, ready for a more traditional black satin finish. Gareth got to grips with the worst areas on the rear wings, and what he found was that there were 2 layers of paint and undercoat. So it seems that when the first layer reacted, they just primed over it and repainted, which is what led to those strange lines in the paint. A coat of epoxy primer was next, and then finally time for the lime. No, down. Now we're going to get to the painful news about that engine in a moment, but first I quickly want to discuss this colour. It got down to choosing between the original Pantera lime or the Lamborghini Miura lime, which is even more electric and vivid. I went for the original colour and I'm glad I did. Now personally, I think it looks amazing, and I'm celebrating today as a nod back to the influenza days by wearing a new set of PJs for the filming. But what do you guys think of this colour? Did I just go too far? Now funds on this project are tight and they're getting tighter, so I almost didn't go ahead with this repaint. I was just going to keep it black and just do the engine bay because that was so bad. Special thanks then to Stuart, Gareth and Stan, who did an amazing job, and they helped me out with the price and enabled this to go ahead. And one more thing, I've got the originals now, so I no longer have any need for these wheels. They're Ford fitment, I think they're on Mustangs and stuff like that, and they also come with this sort of add-on spinner that goes over the top. So if you're interested in these, please send me a message. When we saw the car for the first time, we knew that the engine had been rebuilt. It had new Edelbrock heads, it was all very clean and repainted, also had fancy valve gear and a fast road cam. So we assumed it would be good to go pretty much as it was. However, when I got it back, I checked with the boroscope and found out that there were low compression pistons in it. Not really suitable for the job. So I decided more investigation was needed. We started off by removing the water pump and the crankshaft pulley. The vibration damper is next, and it's necessary to have a puller for this. I made a rudimentary one out of a piece of alley and a couple of bolts.
Look me in the eye and tell me it was all a lie. Said you needed me to know that you never let it go, but now you're gone. I don't know how, I guess.
You can see how pleased I am having finally got it off. It was then time for the front cover plate and the valve gear. Pushrod guides were also fitted to these heads, so we're taking those off, and then it's finally time for the head bolts. Using a magnet here to take out the solid lifters. Now taking out the timing gear and then the cam. Before taking this engine apart, I'd already decided that the low compression pistons had to go. They just weren't suitable for what I had in mind with this car. But having now stripped it down, I have had some really bad news, because the bores themselves are actually quite obviously worn and lipped. So this has suddenly gone from changing maybe the cam to something less radical and the pistons to a full, complete engine rebuild. If the bores are lipped like that, the likelihood is that the rest of the engine, maybe the crankshells, all that stuff is going to have to be replaced as well. The first job is to get the block rebored, but rebuilding these engines isn't quite as simple as you think, because they have very thin walls. In America, before overboring them, as a matter of course, they do an ultrasound check to see how much meat there is left. Here in the UK, it's not as common a practice to do that, but after much searching, I did find Derek at Hilltop Services, who does have an ultrasound machine and who does that as a matter of course. So the bottom end was duly shipped off to him. First task was to find out how big the overbore would be so we could order the parts. With my friends in the US, Mike Drew and Dan Jones, who have been so helpful, we finally got down to a spec that would work for the engine. So, listen carefully. We're going to go with the Howard Cams hydraulic roller camshaft. We're going to have hydraulic roller lifters. Obviously before it was a solid lifter system, but it doesn't make sense for me on this car to do that. We're going to go with forged flat top JE pistons. Their Performance Series piston rings. We're obviously changing the main bearings, the cam bearings, the rod bearings, the oil pump. Also the timing set that this had, which is apparently not very good, although it's new. So we're changing that as well, and we're going for a Rollmaster, a Gold Series pre-stretched chain. And finally, a Petronix distributor. So that little lot is already costing me £2,500 in parts alone. Plus there's going to be the cost of the rebuild and the machining, none of which I'd really fully budgeted for. If you feel able to, it would be really useful if you could help out by becoming a channel member. It's only £4 a month, and there are really good benefits to this as well. Now these Pantera videos, they're not that frequent because I don't want to restore this car to a YouTube schedule. I want to do it properly. So if you want to see more frequent updates, members get posts, so they knew a few weeks ago already about the repaint and other stuff. So you'll be more up to date on what's going on with the car, plus you get early access to certain videos as well. Thank you all so much for watching. I hugely appreciate it. Really look forward to when I've done more work on this car and I can show you in the next update.